Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzor-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. My name is Christopher Morgan. I'm here with Louis Duran.
Good evening.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Chris is also a failed stand-up comedian.
I am. And Stephen Ormosi. You think you're really funny, don't you?
No.
Which is really funny because we were discussing Todd Phillips' new film, Joker. And who has a funny log line?
A working class Joker is something to be.
Yes, indeed. And I have no sense of humor, so I will do the plot. Joker is about a guy named oh my god,
Arthur Fleck.
Arthur Fleck, yeah. Arthur Fleck, and he's a clown, and he belongs to a group of clowns for hire. It starts off where he's holding a sign, which is probably one of the most miserable jobs out there, and some kids beat him up, steal a sign, beat him up, and he lives at home with his mom, and we find out later is kind of crazy, but it establishes that she's kind of an invalid. And basically we established that he's a clown. He's got some problems going on. He has this condition where he laughs. It's kind of like a hysterical reaction. He laughs, kind of cries. It's not anything he can control. He actually has a little card that says, please excuse my outbursts. It's a mental condition I have. So it turned, he's one of the many in Gotham who are shit on. And, as the film goes on, we see a big class thing going on between the upper crest, and Thomas Wayne is not portrayed as the philanthropist that he usually is, and is a rich guy running for mayor. And, as we go along.
Basically Cuomo.
Cuomo, yeah. And, long story short, we follow Arthur, and he wants to be a comedian, and turns out a lot of things happen in his mind that don't happen in reality, or vice versa.
Not a comedian, but he's a joker.
He is a joker.
He's an up-and-coming comedian, or he's trying to be an up-and-coming comedian.
I think he's a comedian.
Well, he's
in his own right.
In his own right,
yeah. It's a very
ha funny.
No.
Yeah, he's not ha funny, but he finds out everything in his life is a lie. That his mom adopted him, that she actually was crazy, and that she was abusive and basically gave him head trauma. And he finally realizes his calling when he shoots 3 Wall Street douchebags. And he idolizes a television personality, Murray Franklin, who is just totally out of the 70s and early 80s talk show host. And he
basically a poor man's David Letterman.
I was going to say
Jay Leno almost. Or
Carson.
Johnny Carson too.
Johnny
he's
Carson,
a little kind of like an amalgamation.
a little
about everybody.
I was going to say, I think he's mostly going for Johnny Carson.
Milton Berle. Yeah, I'm trying to flesh this out because I know when we discuss the plot, there's like a lot of little details. So it's good that we're, we could just start talking.
Brush over those details really quickly.
Yeah, because I'm all right.
Yeah, just
long story short.
Yeah.
And Joker becomes Joker, shoots Murray after Murray invites him on a show after Murray makes fun of him. And there's a riot. Everybody idolizes Joker, and he ends up in Arkham at the end. Well, all the rioters. There's a class war that happens at the end.
As any good
superhero
movie should end with.
Yeah, it's really for something as a simple story. There's a lot of little details that go into this, and really what makes this film for me are all the little details and all the little textures. Like his neighbor Sophie, played by Zazie Bates.
Mm-hmm.
Beats from Atlanta, who's always wonderful. He has this whole relationship with her, and I don't think Phillips ever wants you to think that this is really happening, that you could tell this is happening in his head. There's a reality he lives in, and there's a reality that he lives in with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I prefer the reality in his head than the reality he actually lives in, because that's a pretty shitty reality.
Yeah, it is a really shitty
Gotham
reality.
is very shitty.
The United States today.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And, healthcare is being taken away from people, and, wealth disparities growing.
The 1%.
The 1%
is
taking
becoming
everything.
all right, Bernie, take it easy. But no, like,
we got the bougie class.
There is
a
that,
revolution.
There is that part to this movie, and I think that it's an interesting conversation to be had. But sticking to the plot, I thought it was interesting. I think I was briefly touching on this with you guys earlier, but there is the Zazie Beetz storyline. I guess Sophie, which I don't think she ever actually gives him her name. Maybe he sees it on the mailbox or something. But excuse me. I think it's interesting that they have that be his only delusion of this movie that we know about, that is like made obvious.
Yeah,
it's confirmed by the.
Yeah, I think I was expecting there to be more at the end of the movie. That's like, oh, because it's been made clear that he's delusional about this relationship that he has with this woman who lives down the hall from him. That there would be more about this movie that was delusional, and that gets kind of. That's never becomes like a thing.
Well, to be a pedant, there is one other scene where he sees the success of himself as a stand-up comedian, when obviously
that's
everyone's reaction that wasn't the case.
That's true in the very beginning. Yeah, when he imagines himself on Murray Franklin's show, but then he actually does get.
Well, no, but that was actually the first instance. But then also the stand-up.
Yeah, it cuts to everyone clapping at him and him having.
Well, she's like, I feel like that's part of his delusions about her, because
it's also his delusions about everything else in his life.
Sure,
I think that the musical cues really coincide with his delusional self. Well, there's a swelling of music generally when it falls into him going into his own world.
Like but I would say like the only thing about that scene that is delusional is her reaction.
But also
everything
the
else,
reaction.
No.
To him.
Well, no. Hang on.
The audience is silent for most of that set. It feels like they're laughing with him, I think, because...
No, but after that, he says he had a great night to his mother, thinking that because Zazie Beetz was there, he thought he had a great performance.
Yeah, but he says, I had a big date tonight.
No, but what happens is, at the very end of that scene, it cuts out his thing, and you just hear everyone clapping, and the lights go up.
And he's getting into this, getting into his rhythm. He's becoming, like he's I don't know, his dancing or his I don't know, his motions that he goes through, seeing his transformation at that point, like starting to like kind of starting to spill out a little bit.
And they pan around to the back when they do that thing where like the light's on it and it kind of has him in shadow from the back. And then, of course, you see Zazie Beetz laughing, and it's obviously.
Yeah, like he does, like all these scenes that are supposed to be delusions of his are filmed in this way that, like, looking back on them, they're very, very, very obvious. Mm-hmm. But they don't. I like. I mean, I'm going into style a little bit right now, but like he films them in such a way that they're not super obvious from the get-go. Like, you can tell that not everything is quite as it seems, but you don't really know exactly what's going on.
The extent of his self-delusion.
Yeah.
But to skip to plot for a second, this is actually at times a very difficult movie to watch, because nothing is going to go right for him. And every time something goes right for him, you're waiting for the shoe to drop. It's this uncomfortable tension throughout this entire work. When is it all going to fall apart? I'm trying to think of a good movie that it compares to, but it's just a tragedy of a man stuck in a cruel world, and and the only moments of happiness, even though he admits he has no happiness, is in that self-delusion that he builds.
Yeah, and it was really funny because we were saying precast about even the ending where, you know, the ambulance hits him and all the people with the clown masks take him out and put him on the car, and he stands up and they're all like, you know, cheering for him. The fact that, considering that, like, even as you just said, that his delusions are the happiest things in his life, and even ours aren't happy, that I like the fact that maybe he made it to Arkham. That never happened.
No, that never happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They elevated him. So like his happiness now comes from the fact that he is the leader. He is the leader of an anarchy.
But he's not. He only thinks he is.
Yeah.
But there's no clarity about that in the movie.
Yeah, you're really not sure
Yeah,
whether or not that happened or not.
The fact that the last scene is him chained in Arkham means that I think that is not that he was free and then got caught again. It's that the ambulance never hit. It was his thing being like, oh, this is how my people are going to rescue me. The people who my adoring fans are going to rescue me. And that's the delusion he lives with.
That's
which is
honestly
why they also put the end on it, because it's just like, but no, my whole point is I'm adding credence to what you were saying about even his delusions aren't even happy. He's found his happiness in being, you know, this agent of chaos, for lack of a better word. And even that's not real.
That's honestly the way that I like to see this movie, but I don't think that the direction, I guess, did that as much justice as it could have.
Yeah, I agree.
So like, I don't know. I'm probably gonna come down on a 2 on plot.
Yeah, I had to say 2 because after the second act, I was just waiting for the third to end, and it was almost kind of like, I said this to Rich right before we started, that it was almost like Return of the King, when I thought one scene was like, okay, like this is a really great way to end the movie, and then another scene happened, and I was like, okay, this is fine, and then another scene, and I'm like, okay, this has to be it, right? But even after, so remind me again, the last scene was the TVs, right?
No, the last scene was him walking down.
Yeah, he did.
Well, that was walking down.
Yeah, he did. No. Yeah, the last scene was the slapstick, like Scooby-Doo running back and forth between the hallway, like.
Yeah. Okay.
After he killed the woman.
You assume that he killed his psychiatrist.
So the TVs was just before that.
No, there was a couple of scenes before that.
See that
exactly.
I was wondering about, you know, having too many endings, but if you put it in context where the ambulance never, that the whole thing was a delusion. Now having those endings makes a lot more sense to me.
I can see that, but there's still a couple of endings I agree with you on that. But I comparing this movie to V for Vendetta both thematically and to how I feel structurally, that it's an ambitious attempt to create something that doesn't work for the whole through line. And I'm going to give it a 2 as well.
Yeah, 2 for me.
I'm giving it a 3. I loved this movie. I'm going to say it right out. I love this movie.
I did too, but
I really want to see it again. And the more we talk about it, makes me want to see it again through an analytic light, because I'm now fascinated. You know, the things we talked about precast and that we're talking about now gets me really excited to see this movie again. So I'm giving it a 3.
Okay.
Okay. So Louis, that's going to move you to themes.
So we touched a little bit about, you know, the kind of the social structures or the class, like the separation of like the wealth in Gotham. I mean, that's pretty like hard on the nose. Like they talk about, you know, how like the garbage is piling up and everything. You can see like the corruption and everything starting to seep out. But for me, honestly, when I saw the title card and the beginning and then the end, it's a comedy through a tragic character. So for me, like it's seeing tragedy in comedy and comedy in tragedy. There was moments in the movie where the Joker was laughing and I was uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But then when he was trying to be serious, I was cracking up. Mm-hmm. Like the part when one of the biggest things that I was reminded of, I had to look it up because I was just trying to remember everything because I saw it late last night, is when the detectives come in to ask him about the train murders, and this is one of the scenes where he's like very confident. He's like, you know what, get off my back. I'm leaving. I'm going to take care of my mother. He flicks his cigarette and walks right into a glass door. Or right into a glass window. That was hilarious. Like I couldn't, And then the part, my favorite scene, when he kills Randall and the other little person, the little person's there, and he can't reach the door.
Yeah.
Or he can't reach the hatch or the latch. And like, I laughed audibly, but it was such a jarring scene, and then you juxtapose it with something that's comedic.
I think that this movie reaches for like really. I think this movie is trying to reach for like deeper or like deep themes a lot, and sometimes it doesn't get there. But I think exactly what you're talking about is where it succeeds. Whereas like it finds the comedy and tragedy, and it finds the tragedy and comedy, and I did enjoy that part about this movie. I have a lot more to say about themes, but I'm gonna hold off and let you guys talk about it a little bit.
Well, there's an old quote, and I'm going to bastardize the quote because I don't remember exactly, but tragedy is when bad things happen to the powerless, and comedy is when bad things happen to the powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of that justification that he's such a powerless character, but becomes such a powerful force. That's why I think it can weave through that very well. But there's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to bring this. I was having a discussion with someone once. I believe it was about Black Lives Matter, which I'm sympathetic to. And we're talking about pragmatics and incrementalism. And that's all well and good when you're removed from the situation. But when you're actually afraid that if you get pulled over by a cop, you might die, it's a much more immediate situation with you. I have health problems. So Medicare for all is a very serious issue to me. But a person who's healthy, I can understand why they might be more inclined to incrementalism. The Joker, or Arthur, right?
Arthur, yeah.
Arthur is
Arthur Fleck.
going through hell.
Mm-hmm.
Misery. He's not mentally ill, but it's not nature that created him this way. It's actually nurture that created him that way. Being abused by his stepfather.
I mean, he is mentally ill, but
but like
because,
right. His like head trauma has accentuated all of this. So it's not just a stereotype. This guy's crazy. It's more like he was. It might have been all along, but it was exacerbated by the situation, and it's immediate to him. So when he's at the end saying this is not political, I believe it because he's reacting to his environment. It's a political film. Don't get me wrong. And we could talk about the politics of this film. And I think a lot of people are going to. But the final point is, I think this is the bougie cocktail liberal litmus test. If you are actually a progressive, you will say, "Oh, I sympathize with the character and I sympathize with the message of it." And if you're not,
as we all look at Steve-O.
Okay, yeah. You guys talk to me about this fucking shit. I'm gonna
look at the little bougie boy over there.
I'm gonna have my fucking say in a minute.
Well, here's one thing before we get like a little bit more down that, because it kind of all ties in. Another thing that I was seeing is just like the decomposition of all the societal structures that we have. That we lean on. Mm-hmm. So like, I mean, immediately we're talking about, or we're presented that the garbage scene. So obviously there's a lot of government oversight non-government oversight. Programs are being cut for the welfare. The medicine that Arthur is relying on to stay healthy is getting removed from him. He has no job because his coworkers that he thought he could rely on. That he fakes laugh because he's either uncomfortable or because he's just
also because he can't cry too. Because look at when he laughs.
Like he just doesn't have a way to cope with it, and that gets removed from him because he's betrayed in his own sense when he's fired. But he does it himself as well. But also having family to lean on. He finds out that his mother has been lying to him this whole time, and he's been he finds a surrogate in the media, like a figure in the media that essentially also betrays him. Yeah. So everything that he has built up for himself, delusional or not,
his mother was
thrown right back. Yeah,
his mother wasn't even that supportive at first because he's like, "I'm going to become a comedian." He's like, "Do you have to be funny to do that?"
Yeah,
that was.
No, that's I felt for him in that line.
That was very
seriously.
And he's still like and in his delusion, he's like, I take care of my mother, look out for her and everything like that, and in his mind, he feels like he's justified. And I think at that point, once all those barriers, he's freed. He kills his surrogate father. He kills his mother. That really wasn't his mother either.
Freud would have a field day.
I mean, it's
oh my god.
So it's one of those things like he becomes liberated in his own sense, but liberated maybe into his delusion, maybe into his Just
he becomes Ubermensch.
He is like it's so. There's an interesting thing about this movie, which is like to be completely sympathetic with this character is to say that
no.
You like to be completely sympathetic with this character is to first off say that you're completely sympathetic with the Joker, and which is to say that you.
I think Cesar Romero is a charming gentleman.
Which is to say, he very well might have been. I never met him. Unfortunately, he died before I was born. But that is to say that the idea that you are fully justified in like killing your bully, like any bully that has ever fucking been a bully to you, and or anybody bully adjacent, basically, is kind of a fucking stretch, I think. Not only that, and like I get what this film is trying to say, but I think it says it with a little less. I don't know exactly what the word that I'm looking for is, but like it's not quite as like it doesn't quite sharpshoot the issue as much as I think it wants to. The other thing that I felt about this movie is that it feels like it wants to be nihilistic, but really it's just pessimistic, which betrays the fact that it really does care about the issue of like, oh, you know, like I'm super mad about people being dicks to me, but the entire thing that I want to portray with this Joker character is that he doesn't really fucking give a shit. And like that's one of his last lines is like, I'm not political. I don't care about this. But the film itself is not nihilistic. It is pessimistic in terms of society. And I did a talk about nihilism a couple years ago that we put up on the channel, and there is a large difference between those two things. And I think I almost feel like this film is portraying itself as one thing, but actually being another thing. And that's kind of how I feel about it. That's kind of how I felt when I came out of the theater.
What I was going to say was that the Joker, Arthur, actually did care. And it was like, as Ian was saying before, is the nature versus nurture. He was a nurturing person, took care of his mom. He like actually cared, and he was never rewarded for his caring. Like he really, like he wanted to make that child smile on the bus, and the woman's like, stop bothering my kid. It's just like every one of his good intentions. So it turned out the only way he could cope was to not care, was to be a nihilist.
But he never actually doesn't care. That's my point. Like, right? Like he goes through this transition where you're supposed to think that he goes from like wanting to be an optimist when he's on his meds, wanting to be an optimist, to like getting off his meds, becoming a nihilist, and like killing people because he just doesn't give a shit. Which is one thing, and like something that you can break down in one way. But I think what actually happens is he goes from being an optimist to being a pessimist's version of a nihilist. And like that's really what I think happens here. I think, and that's what, like, I was talking to you guys earlier, and I said, like, I think this movie wanted to be deeper than it was, but I don't think it went far enough into what that was supposed to be, and I think that's where it fell short for me, and that's where I think that it's gonna, like, lose people on one stage, and then also, like, gain these fucking, like, incel assholes. I'm sorry if you're an incel, fuck you. But like,
we don't have any fans anyway.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know. Nobody cares.
No, John Smith.
John Smith is not an incel. He's good.
No, he's awesome. Hey, man.
I don't know. He might be.
Yeah, that's true.
So thank you for insulting. You potentially.
Yeah, thanks,
insulting that one.
Listen, he watches everybody.
But no, like that's kind of like how I felt when I came out of the theater. I was like, this is gonna be really like polarizing for no reason.
I'm going to bring this back to Les Miserables. in the book, there's a great work about the bourgeoisie in it. and saying that it's the nobility who raises some members of the bourgeoisie, or some members of the peasant class up to the bourgeoisie to be a firewall between the peasantry and the nobility. And that the bourgeoisie be so afraid of losing what little they've been given by the nobility that they do everything in their power to stunt on the peasant rising. So I think you might lose the people who are upset by what this message is, are the people who are afraid we're losing the pedants that makes them somewhat superior to the people who are actually downtrodden. And I think that there is an anger. I think it's actually legitimately a power fantasy for the people who have no recourse out of the misery of their lives, who make less than $30,000 a year, who are in debt, who don't get the medication they need, saying that I can rise up and stuff. So yeah, there is optimism there. It's an optimism for someone who is the weakest rising up to become, even if it's a fantasy, the most powerful there. Similar to how Taxi Driver was. Although I think Taxi Driver handled it much better.
Yeah.
I think that there's thematically the same thing.
So, like, I guess that's what it is. Like, I felt like Taxi Driver was more of, like, an actual nihilist view as opposed to what I just mentioned, like a pessimist version of nihilism. And I think that's where it kind of fell short for me in that regard a little bit.
I'm still giving it a 1, though, because I think it was...
I'm going to give it a 1. I mean, first of all, being bipolar and having to wait for drugs to go generic. I mean, Medicare for all. Like, I'm sitting there, I wanted to scream at the theater. It's just like, we're shutting down the program. And again, you brought up a really good point, precast. I think it helps to reinforce what you just said on a smaller scale. His caseworker didn't seem to...
She was disinterested.
Yeah.
No, he was just another case file. That
and she's like, I told you to bring your note, your journal every week. And then all of a sudden, as soon as her funding's cut, it's like, hey, we're on the same plane.
Because it's immediate to her.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm gonna diverge for one moment, because you brought up a really good point when you were talking about Black Lives Matter. Like, you're sympathetic to it, and until you are actually the one who's afraid of being pulled over. A few years ago, I was driving home from camping with a friend of mine, and I won't go into the personal details, but he was upset about something, and we're out in the middle of bumblefuck nowhere driving. So I couldn't do anything but hold his hand. So we're there holding his hand. I'm letting him talk. And a tractor trailer passes by. And for a second there, I thought, well, he doesn't know we're heterosexuals. And I'm like, why does this matter? And for one moment, you thought about letting go of your friend's hand who really needed you. And I'm not going to compare, but if you want to have the smallest sliver, one moment of what it might be like for somebody else who's not you. Yeah. I'm not going to compare me to that, but for one brief moment, I got a glimpse of what people who don't have my level of privilege.
And we're in New Jersey, which is a fairly liberal place.
Yeah, well, this was out in I'm not going to name the state, but it was out in Hicks. But still, it was one of those things where. So it does.
I'm familiar with bumblefuck nowhere in New Jersey.
There's
place, wrong time.
But what I just want to reinforce your point, and to the whole thing that came very clear to me thematically with this film was that, it might not have been a perfect exploration of it, but there's enough going on that I need to see it again, because there was a lot of puzzle pieces thrown on the floor, and I think listening to our conversation, things are put together, and there's things that Steve brought up that I want to see again to kind of reinforce. So, I'm definitely giving it a 1, because even if all of its intentions weren't realized, I think enough of them were. And the fact that I want to go back and see how many were is a good enough argument to give this thing a 1.
Right on.
Yeah.
What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 1. I was leaning on 0 for a second, but I think talking about it kind of opened my eyes a little bit.
So I'm not going to take away from this film that it brings up a lot of very salient and important things to talk about. I wish I'd come away from it with a better feeling about what that conversation was in terms of the movie. I think I'm going to give it a 0, but it's very close to a 1. Like there's a lot that comes up in this film that's important and very good to things to talk about. But again, I think it like falls a little bit short.
May I just make one last pitch?
Yeah.
Everyone. We had a pretty intense and at times emotional conversation about things that are much more so than a lot of the other thematic. We just gave King Kong, which we recorded today along before this. Oh, one for themes with a much shorter discussion of this.
We did.
This is actually, I think, maybe I never like to make predictions about things, but I'm having more emotional conversations about the state of our world with this film than I have since maybe The Dead Don't Die.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I love that you.
Because I hated The Dead Don't Die.
I love that you have thought about that film again, because I believe when we were talking about it, you said that you might never think about it again.
Yeah.
So
I don't like to make predictions.
Yeah, that's a great example of.
But hold on, so I completely agree. This is going to bring up a lot of important conversations, and I don't discredit that. I don't think I'm going to change my score, but only because.
Bougie fuck.
Yeah, because I'm a bougie fuck. Yeah, I mean, I guess.
No, if you were to,
I'm super bougie.
If you change your score to 1, I would change mine.
Chris,
to 0.
I live in a fucking apartment. You own a house. You're the bougiest fuck of all of us.
It's a very small house.
Whatever.
Two cars.
Still own it. Two car house.
I'm probably the bougiest out of all of us. But I'm going to once again support Ian's argument in that I'm thinking about plot. I mean, we're talking about themes here.
Chris, I love you, and I want to hear what you have to say, but we're at 32 minutes right now. So
all right, well,
we got to move on for sure.
I'm going to make this quick.
Okay.
So, all I'm going to say is I had some stuff to say about plots regarding like the subversions they have with regard to the Waynes, and the fact that the plot, married into the themes, just goes to show you how strong this film is. And we didn't even touch upon the Tinker Toy things about the mythos of what Gotham was. We've discussed.
Not important to the film.
Yeah, but that's
style, if anything.
But that's my whole point. So okay. So we're on to antagonist with Ian. Steve-O?
The 1% of the 1%. Yeah, because it's really an it's a very classist film. It's very much about the downtrodden versus the elites. Even Thomas Wayne, who is filled with rhetoric, behind the scenes, when the veil is parted, you see that he's a narcissistic bastard who is self-serving. And even though he may say the right things about helping out the poor, he doesn't actually. They're all clowns and jokers. That's the villain. And, well, regardless of that, the Joker, or Arthur, is constantly antagonized through this film. Yep. Whether it's based on his mental state or his situations, he is uncomfortably antagonized at every single moment. Every happy thing that happens to him, you're waiting for that antagonist to show up. I like this film. I respect it a lot. I may never want to see it again because of how just uncomfortable some of the scenes made me waiting for that shoe to drop. So I'm going to give a 1 for antagonist there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that the antagonism in this movie is one of the very rare that we say antagonist is one of the strongest points, but I think in this film it almost is, along with probably style. But I think that there is this feeling of dread throughout this movie that really follows you through. They do a really good job of kind of showing how shitty, almost making you feel as shitty as Arthur Fleck feels throughout the movie. And it's there's this really just this feeling of depression that kind of sets in as you're watching it. And it does do a good job in portraying that and personified in the form of Murray Franklin, the talk show host, and Thomas Wayne, and even to some extent, like you know, I feel like this movie is like terrible realizations of the movie almost. It's like, oh, my mother fucked me over. Like, oh, maybe I'll get some relief from the guy that I think is my father. Nope. He's just gonna punch me in the face. Like, oh, like the system has let me down. Like everything is letting, like he has nothing. Literally, there is nothing good in this guy's life. And the only good thing is a delusion of his mind, his fake girlfriends as he beats, and like there is just like this complete feeling of antagonism throughout. And I'm gonna give it a 1 in that regard. So.
Very well said.
Mm-hmm. I have nothing to add.
I don't buy it. I felt like that there was many situations where he did not need to be antagonized at all. He did not need to bring that gun to that hospital and lose his job.
That's true.
That is all his fault. He didn't need to do stand-up. All his fault. He didn't have to go and kill... Oh, I mean, he didn't have to, but like the motivations were there. I get it.
He was being beaten up on the subway.
Well, that's fine. I mean, like that. I feel like that was justified.
But say Randall's the antagonist of this because he gave him the gun.
No, I mean, I can go political, but the gun is the antagonist. No, but no, yeah. I mean, like that's. But like to say, like just like these faceless corporate entities, even like gangs, like there was no repercussions for the gangs that beat him up in the first scene.
But that's life.
But no, like see, I don't buy it because everybody was miserable in that city.
Mm-hmm.
Like he killed those people on the train, and people started dressing up as clowns. Every one of them were just like him.
But that's always been always been Gotham.
But that's 99% of the people are jokers waiting to emerge.
But not all those motherfuckers are killing people, I guess.
Yeah, and I just don't buy it. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I think that was probably one of the weakest parts of the movie for me. Because, like, I only sympathized to maybe a third of it. And I was like, after that, I'm like, this is all on you, man. Like, you didn't have to kill that. You don't have to kill most of these people. And because that's just, I mean, I get it, it's Joker, but it's not the comic Joker that we're used to, or the ones like, this is their own interpretation of Joker. I'm not trying to use the other back source materials or anything like that.
Say it's no Killing Joke?
No, like, I'm not trying to use any, like, whatever source material they use, I'm not trying to project it onto this. Like, this is their Joker. This is Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and I forgot Todd Phillips?
Todd Phillips
is Joker. And I believe he wrote, the screenplay too, like that's their
director of Hangover 3.
But I'm like, nah, man, like
1.
I'm sorry.
Also, like, Hangover 1 and 2.
Maybe this movie didn't necessarily need antagonists because Gotham is kind of that all-encompassing, miserable kind of city.
It's life in the city.
Maybe Gotham's the antagonist.
Yeah, definitely.
But I still like I said, like everybody's miserable. You could put this on you could shine a light on everybody here, and like another person, like the guy that got shot by the cop on the train.
It seems Bruce is doing pretty well.
Yeah, I was gonna say
he got traumatized.
He's behind, but
only at the end.
Bruce is doing pretty well until his parents get murdered in front of his eyes.
It's all fun and games until your parents get murdered.
He's got like his fingers
until it's immediate.
Yeah, exactly. Until it's immediate.
I don't know. So
that's pretty immediate.
Solo, you're saying 0?
I'm saying 0.
Antag? All right.
Yeah, no. I don't know. It took away a little bit from me.
Okay. And Steve-O, I love you too, so would you give us the pro tag?
It's interesting that I get this question. So Arthur Fleck has to be the protagonist of this. And Joaquin Phoenix does an incredible job portraying him. And I guess, like, so, I feel like based on the portrayal, I almost have to give it a 1. But, like, I'm tied up in this, like, I don't know. It's this, like, is this a, you know what? I am probably going to give this a 1. It's a somewhat believable transition from this like happy-go-lucky guy who gets off his meds, and then because he's off his meds, he Well, not just because he also gets off his meds, because his first murders are before that happens, but he kind of transforms into this psychopathic killer, right? It's like a very strange thing to have a straight up psychopath be your protagonist, and I don't know what the. I guess I don't know if I. You know what? I'm not even going to go down that route. I think that the portrayal is really good. I think that the arc is, for the most part, somewhat believable. Although, like, of course, if you see a person in real life, you hope that they can overcome their desire to just straight up murder people. I guess, are you guys giving yourself like, nah, let's just murder people? Looks like,
I think we're all looking at each other like, what does Steve get into?
Yeah. Steve-O.
Well, what do you think?
I love. I don't know if you
no,
to the crowd.
Go.
For me, I love Joaquin Phoenix's performance. I think sometimes the cinematography gave him a little bit more leverage, whereas I think the moments where we see him being in the character is a little bit stronger. Like the one shot with when he's doing stand up. Like that was the most uncomfortable scene for me.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, like this is going into style,
uncomfortable scenes,
but still, like, I think that was great. And then when they transition, they cut the audio out, and like that made it a little bit more powerful. But him going down the stairs, like just the anger and stress that he exhibited, and you could see it without even looking at his face, like just the tension and all this, like this monster that's building up inside him that wants to come out. And even the first scene when he's putting the makeup on, trying to make himself smile, like I thought that was really powerful. So seeing him kind of like flesh himself out from Arthur to Joker, I loved.
Is palpable the right term?
I mean, depends on what you're saying.
Like that his anger
is palpable,
and his emotion are palpable.
Yeah.
Yes,
is
absolutely.
That okay. The rage of a clown when no one's around. This is a fantasy portrayal, very believable. I mean, yes, it's a sequence of events that would probably break anyone. Although there is time gaps in things. It never felt like it was day after day. It always felt that this was like, here's one crappy thing that happened to him that Wednesday. Oh, we're now on the next Thursday and this shitty thing happens. So it's more believable that way. And I don't know how he actually fostered that kind of feeling in me, that this was over a length of time.
Yeah.
But it did feel that way. And yeah, I mean, you might not agree with what he did, but you can certainly understand that, or at least I can see the monster that exists inside everyone, and how we're all one bad day away from making poor choices.
Right. Like it's almost Todd Phillips' version of Killing Joke, which I think was done better in the comic Killing Joke, because that's one of the best fucking superhero comics ever, but in my mind. But like,
as opposed to what, the animation thing?
No, not the fucking movie.
Good.
Please, for the love of God, Chris, for the love of God.
I couldn't make it through the trailer.
There was no God in that one.
For the love of Batman.
Yes.
And all that's holy. No, the comic. But like, like this is like almost his version of Killing Joke, where it's like, the idea behind that was one bad day can change anybody's life. And this is like one bad life can change anybody's day.
That was a whole
But yeah, I do see the importance of that. Anyway, Chris, go on. Sorry.
The importance of. Are we still on?
We're on protagonists.
I
don't think you've spoken about protagonists.
No, I haven't. You lost me at the Killing Joke thing. So, go
read the Killing Joke.
No, I thought he was great. I thought the character arc was great. It had this, because of the delusion thing, there was a quasi non-linear narrative to this. And because it did start off with him putting on makeup, but it seemed, I wasn't really sure looking back on it what time it was. So yeah, this is definitely a movie I want to go back and see. And, but I thought, I think it's, pretty apt what you're saying. One bad life can ruin, somebody else's day. He was, and I thought, like, Joaquin Phoenix's performance aside, because he empirically did a fantastic job. They created a character that you can sympathize with, identify with, but at the same time, completely not identify with. In other words, there is that nice dichotomy where, like, you, as I think we were all saying, your sympathy only goes so far. And where we all get angry at certain things, we all want to punch a wall, but there's enough levels of it. So, where your reality would end or where your vengeance fantasy would begin or whatever. I think there's enough. I think this does a really good job of not glorifying the violence, but understanding what led him there, whether that would in reality or fantasy leave somebody else there. And that's a whole nother issue. I'm not going to go near. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying that, like, in terms of a dynamic character, I thought they did a really, really good job of creating this really dynamic character.
Let's just go
1.
I think it's 1's all around, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that leaves me with secondary. Well, I'm just going to start off by saying Brian Tyree Henry. He played the clerk at Arkham, and he is always phenomenal, no matter what he does. Beale Street, where he had, a slightly larger role than this. He's always fantastic.
He was such a fucking, like, nothing character in this movie. By the way, he was such a nothing character.
No. But what I'm saying is, I know we're talking characters, not just, we're talking performances as well. But I mean, here's somebody who has gravitas, who can make a nothing character have a lot of gravitas to him. But with that said, without the secondary characters, there would be no motivation for for our protagonist. I mean, if you want to talk about Gotham, if you want to talk about, because I'll let you guys go into specific characters, but I'm just talking in general. The antagonist, everything around him is basically to a certain degree an antagonist. But if you break it down to the supporting characters, each one kind of antagonizes him in a different way. And whether it's something like the detectives outside the hospital who do not approach threateningly, it's kind of a benign, very kind of like by the numbers, kind of like, hi, can we talk to you? To something like where the gang of kids beat him up. I mean, there is going to be a thin line between, like, supporting and what we consider antagonists, but I feel like all the other characters gave it nuance. And his friend, the short person, the small, where he's like, after he kills Raymond, and you're not sure, he can't get the door unlocked because the chain's there and he can't reach it. And you're not sure what he's going to do, and he unlocks the chain and then closes the door, and he's just like, you're the only person who's ever been nice to me. Kisses him on the top of the head and lets him out. I mean, that is a beautiful interaction. So I would count his character, who I'm blocking, as a secondary character that I thought was important because he was one of the few characters that reminded him of his humanity.
You mind if I jump in quickly? So I brought up V for Vendetta earlier. And V for Vendetta, all of those characters that V kills are demonstrably bad, whether you're doing with the comics or the movie. They're people that the priest is also a pedophile or whatever that was. Like, we want to see the finish. What I like about this is that they're really not. It's a cesspool, and the people in Gotham are assholes, but they're realistic assholes. None of them really do anything to make you say, like, yeah, he's such a black character that I want to justify his death. No, the guy's a fucking son of a bitch. And did he do enough to justify his death? Well, the Joker seems to think so. Now, are we saying that, like, these secondary characters, did they do enough to warrant their deaths? Was it justified deaths? I think that's maybe an issue that people are going to have here, because basically you have politicians with empty promises who have private positions and public positions. Mm-hmm. You have the media who sets up people to embarrass, which he's a mixture of TMZ and CNN. Even though he's portrayed as a Johnny Carson type character, but what he does is that kind of shaming culture.
Yeah, the only reason he brought him on is because the audience, or like we got callbacks about very, very popular, not because we wanted you back, but
he's basically William Hung.
He's,
there you go.
But the character's not killing people in the thing. He's just being a jerk. And is that enough to warrant death? I say yes. Let's kill them all. Let God sort them out. So I'm giving it a 1.
And by the way, I just wanted the little person. His character's named Gary.
Gary.
Bought
him a bottle of hooch too. They found out about his mom.
Yeah.
Like that's why with that scene in particular, that's why it's my favorite scene, because it's the most. And I did say I didn't want to like. I guess for the character that they had, like that's the most Joker. That's the Joker that I know, where it's like it's such a violent, like just so visceral and like violent, like just
yeah.
And he does it so personally with the pair of clippers.
He just lashes
and
out.
Just like blood everywhere, and he smashes this guy's face into the wall, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, Gary, you can go." And then he scares him.
Yeah.
Right before he's leaving, it's just like,
and he laughs.
And then he kisses on. I forgot about the kiss on the head.
He's like, "You're the only one who is nice to me," which is such a great thing, because they set up you're not sure what he's going to do, but the fact that he doesn't kill him proves that he's not going to just randomly.
He has his own sense of morality, even if he disagrees with it.
There you go.
So it's what it says is the chaotic. Is there
chaotic evil for sure?
Is it chaotic evil? I wasn't sure. I'm not too.
Putting more towards lawful evil.
What? Yeah, I mean, like this. There's this cast of supporting characters that's actually pretty good. You guys have mentioned Gary, Randall,
his boss,
whose name I don't remember, his mother Penny,
probably the worst person actually in the
Frances Conroy, right?
I mean, she's mentally ill.
Oh, she's mentally ill.
Yeah. Great actor. She does a good job. Mm-hmm. She is mentally ill, but also she puts him through fucking hell. Yeah. Especially, like when he's a young child. And really just completely lies to him his entire life. You've got the guy who plays Thomas Wayne, who is fine. He wasn't like anything special.
Yeah, didn't really stand out.
He was in Dark Knight Rises. He got kidnapped by Catwoman.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. He got kidnapped by Catwoman.
Wow. I did not remember that. You got Zazie Beetz playing Sophie, most of which is not real, but I think she does a fantastic job, as always. I really like her as an actor.
Her trying to get out of that situation where he's in her house was actually a really good scene.
Oh,
so
my God.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, where she's like, I have my kid in here. Like, it's so good. You have, who else was I going to mention? That might have been it. I think you guys mentioned the cops earlier. So, yeah, I think that...
De Niro, too, I guess.
Oh, yeah, and have we not mentioned De Niro?
A new actor named De Niro? I think
this guy...
He's up and coming.
This guy, I think his name might be Bobby De Niro. Does a pretty good job. Goes colloquially by Bobby. Yeah, he's... Robert De Niro is good in this, too.
You're talking about him?
You talking about me?
Well, that just even leads more to compare Taxi Driver to this, right?
Yeah, I do think that Taxi Driver is a better version of this movie. But anyway, I think that the supporting characters did a really good job in this film. Some really good performances, and I'm going to give them a 1. That's it.
I just have one last thing to say. There's a lot of really good comedians that we haven't mentioned. Gary Goldman, I think. I know the last name is Goldman.
Gary Goldman, Mark Maron.
Yeah, there's a lot of good cameos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you giving it?
I like 1. Yeah, I like it.
Sounds like 1's all around.
Yeah.
Okay, which brings us to Louis with dialogue.
Ooh. So to go back well, I'll wait for this in style a little bit, but the things that they had in his journal, some of the things he said in the third act when he was on the show with Murray, I wasn't exactly a big fan of, but I started getting I got the idea that he had become Joker at that point. But
that was like his transition to Joker, basically, right? Like,
like he was, I think, just before, like right in the curtain, like he was dressed as a Joker, but when he finally went on stage and started talking to Murray. But what was this? One of the lines was, I think, mental illness. It was like, when you have a mental illness, they want you to act like you don't have it. Even though everyone, like his mother, suffering from it, people around him might be suffering from it. He himself, and like through it seeping into the movie, like I'm pretty sure we're seeing this through his point of view. So we're experiencing it also with him. So that kind of like it struck a nerve with me with his mother saying like, "Don't you have to be funny to be a comedian?" That hit me really hard. So I think the dialogue especially was really powerful. I think it could have been better. But I don't think there's some movies where it could have taken away from the character. So for me personally, I can't. What was the other one? I hope I make a bigger difference, or people make more sense of my life when I'm dead. I forget what it was.
It's sense though,
I hope my death makes more sense with a C than my life did.
Yeah,
was the phrase.
Which, I mean, that ties right into, like, because he technically dies on stage as Arthur and comes out as Joker. So that's how I was seeing it. Yep. That's why it became more profound for me, and that's why I gotta give dialogue a 1.
I agree.
For the sake of time, I agree. I'm moving on.
Yeah, I think that I'm gonna give dialogue a 1. It was pretty well done, and basically made the points that it wanted to when it wanted to.
Actually, I do have one last statement to say. I apologize. At the very last scene, when the psychiatrist or whoever she was talking to the Joker, who now he's the Joker officially, he's laughing and she's like, "What's funny?" And it pauses and reflects. I'm like, "Please say you wouldn't get it." And he does, and I'm like,
"Yeah."
And then he kills her.
Yeah. Or maybe not. Who knows?
You're not in on the job.
Yeah.
Maybe he just has red paint.
Or he just might be crazy.
Maybe he's born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline.
Sure.
Okay. And
well, what are you giving dialogue, Chris?
I'm giving it a 1.
Okay.
He's going to be in this movie at 10.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Spoiler alert.
Just like Suicide Squad. No, wait. That was a different movie.
No. You...
No arguing.
Oh, style with me? Okay.
It's to you, style, Ian.
This is a fantastically stylistic movie. The music's great. There's actually another scene where they're doing this kind of... He's dancing now, and they're doing this kind of like Rocky type... Not Rocky in this movie, like a rock kind of song. Like, I wanted to switch over to classical. I think this would be much cooler classical. And they do. I'm like, you're reading my mind, movie. This is great. But like, the camera work, the sound design, the musical score, that laugh, which is so disturbing and so uncomfortable, purposefully. Everything about this, the pacing, I felt the pacing was actually, maybe the end I agree with you a little bit, but like the initial pacing of this film and his slow descent into the Joker, I thought worked really well. So I'm moving in a very, very strong 1.
I agree. I was just going to bring up the music and the sound design because that was incredible. You know, cinematography is great. I think in terms of direction, this film is second only to Ari Aster's Midsommar, which is another level of existence. But
do you mean Ad Astra?
Wait, what movie?
The Brad
terrible running gag.
All right,
we're digressing.
No, I give it a 1. Very strong 1.
So quickly for me, I'm going to give it a 1, but I wanted to say that, as I mentioned before, like seeing it as a comedy, seeing comedy and tragedy, but tragedy and comedy as well, is that it felt like a Warner Brothers Looney Tunes movie almost, whereas that it was realistic instead of being, like you stick a dynamite in your face and you got, you only have smoke in your, you only have ash on your face. No, like you're going to blow your head off. Like running in the first scene when he gets his sign stolen, he's running through the crowd. Everybody's like, "Stop him! Stop him!" It's funny until he gets beat up in the alley.
Yeah.
And it's juxtaposed with Charlie Chaplin when like all these elitists are watching the Charlie Chaplin. He's revolving around the thing. Like, no, in real life, he probably would have died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He probably would have died. And when he's and like the vibrancy of the color, like how it's very grim. The shots that they had, him going up the stairs constantly, and then finally when he becomes like he's in character. He's going down dancing, and then once he gets to the bottom of the stairs, the cops see him, and he runs, and it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And how vibrant yellow was that sign at the beginning,
way,
too.
Yeah.
That Charlie Chaplin film was Modern Times, which is a...
we reviewed that.
Yeah, it's a great film, but it's also a critique of capitalism and the capitalist system, and to have a bunch of elitists...
A bunch of capitalists laughing at
it is perfect.
Well, that's,
Yeah, it is perfect. Like, I think that the style of this movie is one of the stronger points. I think that... I think that Todd Phillips has a good eye for at least a good cinematographer, if nothing else, and has a good idea of what he wanted. Had a good idea of what he wanted this film to look like and feel like and sound like, and I think that he did it really well. Also, I almost felt like it was in terms of the time period. I almost felt like it was almost timeless. Like or not timeless, but like out of time. It felt like it was the late 70s.
I honestly couldn't place it. Yeah,
it felt like it
says 1981, but I couldn't place
but it felt like it was late 70s, but also it didn't quite feel like that. Like it also felt like it could have been like modern without cell phones. Basically,
it's an alternate. Yeah, it's a fake city too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like.
So I think he did a good job with that. I'm gonna give it a 1 for style. So I think it's 1s all around for that, right?
Yeah.
And that's on to me with recommendation. So this is an interesting question for me. I'm not so like I think that you're either gonna like this movie or you're gonna have big problems with it, or like me, you're gonna like it and have big problems with it. And that's kind of where I'm at with this movie. I think that it's a really well done film that at points makes me question what the director wanted to portray or have come to the forefront of his ideology on what this movie was. I think that it is something that kind of glorifies a fucking literally for 80 years a psychopathic character who has been he's been for the run time of the Joker has been a psychopath, and he's like, let's find out why this character is worthy of sympathy, right? It's like a character who's killed, like just been a murderer, unsympathetic murderer for the entirety of his existence, and let's figure out why we should care about his backstory. And the entire idea of the Joker also, before this film, is that he doesn't have a set backstory, and he doesn't have a real history, and that's kind of what made him interesting, at least to me, was the fact that you were never able to pin him down. He was this like very mysterious sounds like a cop-out word, but like mysterious foil to the Batman, and now it's like, let's give him his own thing, and let's give him a backstory, and let's like try to make you feel bad for this character that is a unfeeling murderer machine, basically. So I have very mixed feelings about this. I'm not gonna give a score right now. I want to hear what you guys have to say about recommend.
There are people I would not recommend it to. But there are enough people I would recommend it to, and the fact that I want to see it again, and there's people I will recommend it to, I want to talk about this film with in greater detail. I'm going to give it a recommendation.
I wasn't sure where to fit this, but I think recommendation might be the best. There was police present when I went to the movie theater, and I thought I don't believe irony is a word, but I think that you guys might be better kind of identifying.
It actually kind of reflects what's in the movie.
It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it like that? You're going to go see a Joker movie out of fear. Well, not really lingering, but something that was on my mind. I didn't think about it until, you see police there present. You see more staff than usual for an 8:30 showing on a Thursday night. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm looking left and right in this movie theaters thinking, all right, is this going to be something that happens in my life right now? Going to see a Joker movie.
Right.
And I don't know, it was just being a comic book fan, growing up thinking like that, how big this has gotten, like how triggered, I guess is the word now that people have been using, can become with something like this. I say that, yeah, I recommend it because it brings up a lot of things that we have been discussing. Maybe I don't agree that they did it successfully, but I feel like talking about it is definitely the thing that we should be doing. So I would totally recommend it just for that.
That's a great point.
One of the great parts of a nebulous character like the Joker is that he can update throughout time, and that's why he has a long-lasting appeal. Whether you go back to the Cesar Romero Joker, which was just a joke, like he's literally the clown prince without being of crime. There, he's just terrible. Or whether you're going back to the 50s when he's talking about the famous boners. I constantly reference that.
Sure.
You see those.
Just constantly ejaculating.
He was always making boners.
Yes, exactly. To like Michael Keaton, to whoever,
Jack Wilson,
all those
Heath Ledger, and then Heath Ledger.
This is very much a Joker of our time we're in, and think of the conversation we had here. So, Comrade Joker. Fighting the powers that be. Perhaps the Batman no longer represents the hero. Maybe Batman's who we should want, but Joker is the hero we need right now.
They got him, at that time. That's who they needed, right?
Well, I certainly don't agree that Joker is the hero that we need. But
no, because you'd be up against the wall.
Yeah, well, I would have been murdered by Joker, I guess. Great. Good for me.
Good for you.
Good for you. Good for you.
You've been on the news. This guy murdered by...
Nah, nobody would give a shit about me. I'm no Thomas Wayne. But
no, you'd be one of the douchey guys.
I'm no douchey guy. I mean, maybe, but I'm no rich douchey guy.
Lay it on us.
Lou, you made the most compelling argument. And for that, I give you 1 point. Yes. I will. You're right. Like it is a conversation starter.
I say like
for sure.
I don't.
There are people that I would not recommend this to.
Yeah.
Because I think like honestly, if you have dealt with any kind of like gun violence, you probably are going to be not having a good time watching this movie, or like watching your fucking back while you're watching this movie, as you mentioned, Lou.
Yeah.
But it is a movie that will, as we have found out today, 1 hour and 10 minutes into this fucking podcast, will spur a conversation. And I guess for that reason, I'll give it a recommendation. But I do want to say that it's a movie that can inspire a lot of just straight up fucking fear. And like I think it addresses things that people are very afraid of right now, including like, you know, just the fear that somebody under the auspices, and even if you're not, like, here's the other thing, like I feel like anybody who is a mass shooter at this point is going to be, or like like a serial killer, or like a mass killer, is going to be labeled as mentally ill and that's what they're trying to say is like anybody that does this shit is mentally ill, which isn't always the case.
They do that in this one though, because
I don't
they
think
do.
they do.
it
I don't
with,
think so. I don't think they do a good job representing, but I don't think they do. I don't think they blame it.
No, and I think they do a good job of showing how fucked up the system is.
Yeah, that's the real point. It's should we worry more about, because I had mass like Columbine when I was young, but it was rare. It didn't happen that much. Why does it happen more now? Is it because people are crazier than they've ever been? No, I think people have been crazy all the time. I think that the system, and this is what it's doing, saying the system is causing these situations, that we shouldn't necessarily make, like, having a sympathetic monster is alleviating maybe some of the, like, maybe we should reflect not on blaming, in a sense, another victim of the system that is lashing out incorrectly, but we should look at that, and I think that's what the importance of this film is.
In that case, I would say watch this movie, but if you want to watch a movie that gets into that a lot more and does it, I think, better, watch We Need to Talk About Kevin, and I'm going to call it that, so I'm going to give it an 8 for me.
Okay. So that leaves Louis and Steve with 8s. That leaves Ian with a 9. And that leaves me with a 10, which gives us an aggregate score of 8.75. And Steve-O took off points for themes. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't convince him. And Louis, same with antagonist. And I was the only one who gave plot a 3. I think the fact that the spoilers were light and the socio-political discussions were heavy. I
think you gave out all the spoilers in your plot summary.
Did I? It kept tripping up because I'm like, well, this isn't the themes.
Everything.
This isn't the themes. This isn't the themes. And there's a lot of subversion when it comes to the Waynes and the mythology. And if anybody has anything else to say,
no, I have to pee.
Yeah, all right.
I do have one thing to say to no one in particular. Comic book movies are cinema. It might not be good cinema. It might be bad cinema. It might be average cinema. But it's cinema.
Fantastic.
Logan's fantastic. Yeah,
that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah.
And Suicide Squad sucked.
Don't fucking shoot anybody because of this movie.
All right. So with that said,
in general, stop shooting people.
Or in general.
I have been Chris Morgan. Knock knock. Here's Louis Duran.
Have a good night.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Conrad Joker sees the memes of production.
And Stephen Hermosi.
Good night.
Medicare for all.
Amen. Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?